Hey folks, Gordy Tremolin with episode 3 of part 2 of our Game Plan 2020 series. Today we're talking sales management, moreover sales measures, the key performance indicators that you take a look at when you're coaching your sales team. First thing you should know, they need to follow your selling process. So if you decided on a sales path that works for you, those are the things that you should measure to make sure that your team is doing what you ask of them. So in my store, the first thing I measure is first-time encounters. We look for the average salesperson to talk to about 40 first-time customers as they walk in the door, okay? What we find is that if the salesperson talks to less than 40, perhaps they're not being as attentive on the lot or paying attention to customers. If they're doing significantly more than 40, if they're talking to 70 people a month, they're not going to have enough time to deliver the vehicle or follow up on the customers and do the rest of their job. So it's very important that they stay around that number. Now, why do I say first-time encounters? I don't count the encounters that my salespeople have when they've gotten someone to return to the dealership on a follow-up. That feels better to the salespeople. They don't feel like they're being monitored at every single thing, and we want to encourage them to follow their customers. The next measure are demos. Just like shoes, you don't buy them unless you try them on. The same is true of an automobile, particularly when you're spending thousands and thousands of dollars. So we look for our sales consultants to demonstrate about 70% of our customers on a vehicle. The next step, logically, is a write-up or a quotation of figures and so forth. We look for that to be about 50%. Then there's a finance quote. What's my payment? We're digging a little bit in. It's more like a trial close. We look for about 40% on that. And lastly, a sale, we look for our closing ratio to be about 30%. Okay? The reason that I look at those ratios, and you will find, first of all, those of you that are in the buy here, pay here business, you're going to flip a little bit. You're going to do demos at about 50%, and write-ups and finance quotes are going to be 60 and 50 respectively. That's because the customer is concerned about being able to afford the vehicle before they try it and fall in love with it. Okay? So the next step, the hardest step, is coaching your people. Now, years ago, old-fashioned sales management, they'd have a save a deal meeting, and we'd take a look at everything that the salesman's penciled, and we'd, where are you at on this? What are you doing this? Why do we close this? It becomes really very intimidating for your salesperson. It's a little bit more like a shouting session. Instead, in coaching, what I do is I do what's called story hour. At least twice a month, you sit down with your salesperson, and wherever you've got all of your key measures marked down, you go through customer by customer with the salesperson, ask them where they're at with Betty Lou and how they're doing with George and so forth, ask them a little bit of information about that deal. And what you'll find is whether or not they have a grasp of knowledge of those customers, indicating that they've followed them up, whether or not they've demoed them properly and they're following the steps. I guarantee you'll find deficits, and then you can hold your people accountable by saying, hey, look, looks to me like we're a little light on write-ups. Perhaps we should sit down and try and focus on that. What are we going to do to increase your write-ups? Put a quantitative number on it and hold your people accountable. And that's how you increase your results, by coaching. Okay. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about your managers. Okay. If you're the main manager or if you've got a secondary manager, you want to be managing and monitoring your appraisals. Make sure that you're getting a proper percentage of all the trades that you take a look at. Now, how do we do that? Well, most deals, about 70% of deals, have a trade-in to consider. You're going to appraise that vehicle. You want to break it down by make and make certain that you're getting at least 30 to 40% in each category that you appraise. That way you know that you don't have any deficits, whether or not you're prejudiced toward or against a particular make. One notation on that, if you're in a niche market, say for example you focus on trucks, or maybe you're a new car store and you sell Fords, you want to make sure that you dominate your niche market. So in those cases, you should be at 70% appraisals to trade-ins. And the importance there is that you want to dominate your marketplace. Don't give it to somebody else. The next measure is F&I. You're going to have a finance process. It's important. It's part of buying. It's a key to consumer buying the vehicle. Make sure that you don't sell just one item in F&I. Make sure that the items are spread across the board so that you're not focusing on one thing. You want to make sure that you're selling to the customer and not just because your manager's favorite thing is to sell a service contract or things of that nature. So those are a few things to take a look at when you're coaching folks and when you're monitoring your operation. I hope you've enjoyed that, and next week we're going to get together and we'll talk a little bit about fixed operations. Until then, good selling.